Info Plus for genuine information.
Namaste, welcome to the show again. So आजको कुराकानीको लागि मसँग फेरि again very special guest हुनुहुन्छ. We have Australian Ambassador to Nepal, Her Excellency Felicity Volk. I would like to welcome her on the show. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thanks so much, Namaste, and great to see you again.
How have you been?
Very well, thank you. Yes.
It's going to be your third interview on our TV channel, right?
I know, which shows how long I've been in Nepal. I have one more year to go with my posting, and it's always a pleasure to have a chance to talk to the Himalaya
Always
TV
pleasure to have
team.
you again on our TV channel.
Thank you.
So I'd like to begin with Australia and Nepal relationship. So Nepal and Australia have bilateral relations, which we know that, and then a relationship since more than 63 years, that too. And both countries have good reciprocal relation. So how do you see your personal journey to Nepal as an ambassador, and how would you like to set priority for the next coming 1 year?
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's a very strong relationship. And as you said, 63 years of diplomatic relations. But I often think the bedrock of our relationship are the people-to-people links. And that includes students travelling both ways. It includes the diaspora population. It includes the very large number of Australians who travel to Nepal as tourists. So we have really strong linkages. I'm in the fortunate position as ambassador that I have such a great, easy relationship to be managing. But there are areas where I think it's important to grow our connections. So in my remaining year here as ambassador, a key focus for me will be our trade and investment relationship. Now with borders open, we're seeing more two-way traffic of business people, and I'm keen to provide support to encourage trade and investment ties with Nepal. But I'm also keen to see more Australian students coming here to Nepal. I'm keen to see a flourishing sort of two-way exchange. And of course, just today we have our new international development policy globally being announced. And so our development work in Nepal will be another area of critical connection with a focus on social inclusion, gender equality and climate resilience activity through our development program.
I'll come to trade and business later. First, let's come to student. That, like you mentioned, it's about international education, Australian education, demand of Australian education here in Nepal. So Assistant Foreign Minister of Australia recently visited Nepal, right? So would you like to say something about this visit and the purpose? Actually, it is also heard that Australia is adding the number of scholarships quota to Nepal, right? So is this a plan of Australian government, or is it just a coincidence, the visit?
Well, I'll start with the visit, and it's important to note that this was the first visit by an Australian government official with the word minister in their title in 38 years. Our foreign minister last visited back in the 1980s, and that was Bill Hayden. We've had a number of high-level visits since then, but this time we had our assistant foreign minister visit, and it was a very important visit, both signalling the importance attached to the bilateral relationship, but also a great opportunity for the current Australian government to see how well the relationship is working and to identify areas to take forward into the future. Now, one of the key focuses of Assistant Foreign Minister Watt's visit was education. And so thematically, education activities wove through the 2 days he spent here. He met with Kathmandu University and the key academic staff, including a number of alum from Australia who now work at KU. He met with the Australian alum at a reception. He had a chance to meet with leaders across all sectors in Nepal who have studied in Australia and come back to contribute to the country's development. He had a lunch prepared by 2 skilled chefs, skilled migrants to Australia, Nepali young men who had spent 7 years in Australia honing their skills as chefs, who've come back to set up a fine dining restaurant here. Wow. So he was probably the first person to enjoy their cuisine here. So every part of his visit looked at the education relationship and the two-way nature of fostering those educational linkages. But importantly, one other major event during his time here was he witnessed the handover of a 13th century temple strut from the Art Gallery of New South Wales back to the local community in Parton, who have responsibility as custorians of Ratnashwar Temple in Parton. And this strut came back after spending 20 years in an Australian institution. It was recognised as having been removed illegally from Nepal back in the 1970s. Decades later, it ended up in the art gallery, and we were so pleased to be able to return it to its home here in Nepal and the local community, because Australia deeply respects Nepali culture and deeply wants to contribute to the restitution of Nepal's living heritage.
That's where the bilateral relationship, which is very good.
Yeah,
Nepal and Australia.
Yeah, you did ask about scholarships too, and I must answer that
scholarships
question.
quota, yeah, right.
Yeah, so the Assistant Foreign Minister, when he was here, announced that 21 master's level scholarships are being awarded for 2024. So we've just completed the selection and we'll be announcing the successful applicants soon for a cohort to go out to Australia for 2 years master's programs. It's an increase from previous levels, so we're very proud that there's another 21 scholarships available to Nepalis. Yeah.
That's huge actually. Yeah. Okay, Australia's trade with Nepal totaled approximately 2.34 billion as the statistics show, right? So international education sector services, which accounts for around $2 billion.
Correct.
Yes, right?
Yes.
So that's absolutely the key sector, right?
Yeah.
So Nepal now sets a priority to also upgrade and maintain high quality education here in Nepal. So within the country. So would you like to share something on this, like contributing international education around 2 billion, which is huge?
So I often have a conversation with my friends and colleagues at the Ministry of Education here about ways that we can support a genuine two-way educational exchange between Australia and Nepal. I'm very conscious of the fact that there is an imbalance at the moment. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that in the higher education sector here, there's a great need for both Nepal to develop its policies towards higher education, but for those policies to be supported by activity by the donor community, but also by the diplomatic community and bilateral partners. So I'm really pleased that, as you asked this question, only last week I attended the signing of an MOU between Kathmandu University and the Crown Institute for Higher Education in Sydney, so one of our premier higher education institutes, led by Nepal's Honorary Consul General to Sydney, Mr. Deepak Khadkar. The two institutions are now, from academic year 23-24, going to be delivering joint degrees, dual degrees. So anyone who enrolls in those degrees will not only receive a degree from Kathmandu University, they'll receive it also from the Crown Institute for Higher Education. So they get 2 degrees for one. It requires that students spend their first 2 years in Nepal at Kathmandu University receiving tuition, and then 2 years in Australia. So it means that there will be more opportunity to collaborate in the higher education sector here. There'll be more encouragement of Australian students to go to Nepal, to come here to do 2 years of study. And there will be more opportunity then for Nepali students to stay in Kathmandu, spend 2 years here, and then go to Australia, meaning better collaborations. I'd like to see more of this model replicated across the entire sector.
So how does Australia ensure, the government ensure, to welcome quality students there, as we see the changes in policies, immigration policies? So how does Australian government ensure that?
Thanks for that question, and I appreciate that you said quality students, because I would want to emphasise to your viewers that we have a very robust and very rigorous immigration system, and so a lot of scrutiny is given to all applications, not just for students but across the board for all visitors to Australia. But in the student space, I'd really encourage those who are considering applying to make sure they're working with credible, reputable agents, education agents, to make sure that they submit full documentation and genuine documentation, because the applications will be looked at closely. Australia is very keen to welcome quality students to Australia, to our institutions, and we're very fond of students from Nepal. They have a very warm place in the hearts and in the minds and in the activity of Australian society and community members. So I hope that both socially but also through our immigration policy. We're providing strong support to Nepali students coming to Australia. Throughout COVID, there was a lot of additional funding put into the education sector to make sure that both during COVID but also now after COVID, there are strong supports to all students. And this can be in terms of both practical support but also mental health and well-being. And so institutions are well set up to support the international students who come to our shores. But in addition to that, we've got an immigration and visa regime that is very supportive of our students. They're able to work for 24 hours, up to 24 hours a week, and so they can support themselves while they're in Australia. And the post-study work rights are very generous at this point. If a person studies particular disciplines in their bachelor degree, they can work for 4 years. Similarly, for a master's degree, they can stay on to work for 5 years as graduate. PhD students can stay on for 6 years. So very generous arrangements that encourage students not just to get a great world-class education, but also to have the professional development, the professional experience, and to make those networks to stand them in good stead for their entire careers.
That's very generous of Australian universities, right? So, Your Excellency, Australia is also talking about a transnational education. So, statistics show that more than 100,000 Nepalese students are going to abroad every year for the higher education. So, and Australia is definitely the first choice, right? So Nepal has high demand of Australian education, but however, Australian universities seem reluctant to establish the campuses or start affiliate campuses here in Nepal. So how does Australian government promote this? Universities like SCU, UTS and Monash are offering degree in Asian regions, so which include Nepal, absolutely. So how does Australian government promote this into Nepal to cater demand of Australian education here in Nepal, especially locally?
So I'd like to emphasise that both the government and the institutions are very keen to look at these sorts of collaborations and local representation, so developing a presence here in Nepal. I would not agree at all with the idea that those institutions are not interested in coming to Nepal. They're very interested. I think there are two things that need to happen. One is support on the Nepal government side. So there needs to be a shift in education policy to make it possible for ACU, for UTS, for Monash, for other Australian very high-end institutions to come here and to set up campuses or to collaborate with Nepali institutions. And that does require a bit of a shift in Nepal government education policy. On the Australian government side, we're doing everything we can to encourage those collaborations. And as I said just a little bit earlier, there's already been an MOU signed between Kathmandu University and Crown Institute for precisely those sorts of collaborations. But I've also had institutions like UTS College come here only in the last 2 weeks, saying that they're looking to set up a model where they could work on the campus of a Nepali institution to deliver their curriculum, to bring their degrees and to offer them here so that students don't need to go to Australia to study those degrees. Similarly, I know ACU is exploring options here. They're coming in September to look at precisely those sorts of models. So I think we'll see a lot of change in the sector in the next year or so. And I'm hoping this will be supported by Nepal government policy to really encourage providers, education institutions from countries like Australia to come here and to set up a presence so they can service Nepali students in country.
So in order to support Australian education system here in Nepal, the demand of Australian education here in Nepal, as an Australian government, what does the Australian government expect Nepal to facilitate the Australian universities? So how can Nepal government support Australia?
So what's needed critically is a regulatory environment that enables another country like Australia, their institutions, to be approved, authorised to be able to deliver curriculum here. to be encouraged to develop those collaborations with Nepali institutions. All of that requires a government policy that enables that to happen. Likewise, I know that some Australian institutions are interested in investing in the education sector here, but the current investment climate is not conducive. So there needs to be a bit of a shift in government policy, in regulation, in legislation. There's the new education bill, the Federal Education Act, that's currently been passed by the Cabinet here, which I know will go forward for parliamentary scrutiny. So I would hope that that might also assist in providing a stable regulatory environment for collaborations such as the ones we're discussing.
Your Excellency, our team recently visited more than 12 universities when we were there in Australia, right?
Yes.
You've heard of it, I think. So 12 universities in Gold Coast, Brisbane, Port Macquarie, Canberra and Sydney. So we found students so happy there. Our team found it. They were so happy there. But current trend shows that huge number of students, especially applying to vocational colleges, right? Vocational colleges, private colleges have got visa rejection. So can we say that you rather promote universities only, or are there any changes on visa policies, particularly for Nepalese students?
Sure. First of all, I'm really delighted with the feedback that you've picked up from Nepali students and international students across Australia. I always am concerned about the difficulties facing students when they go to overseas. There can be many pressures, and I'm really happy to hear that Nepali students have had a soft landing, that they're finding it a conducive environment and that they're enjoying and benefiting from their experiences. It's great feedback for me to hear. Thank you for that. On the issue of visas and the difference, say, between vocational and educational training, VET, TVET, and higher education, I'd like to emphasise that from the Australian government perspective, from the immigration visa perspective, there's no difference between the two. I think what you're possibly having seen is a bit of a historic bump in that after COVID, after our borders opened, there was a very large number of applications for the TVET sector, and I think partly driven by the fact that courses were shorter, that there were more private colleges in Australia, and the quality of application into TVET enrolment was not as high as the quality of applications for higher education, for universities. So automatically more people were being disqualified out of the TVET sector just because of the quality of the applications. Because people felt that they were being unduly rigorously treated with TVET applications, they shifted their applications towards higher education. And that then meant that more people were being rejected in the higher education sector. You're seeing these internal ups and downs. What I think the numbers tell us, though, is around 50% of Nepali students in Australia study in TVET and 50% study in higher education. So whatever the rejection rate might look like, the number of students is 50-50.
It's balanced.
It's very balanced, yeah. There is no particular policy directed towards either sector. There is no particular policy directed towards Nepal and Nepali students. Our immigration policies, our visa practices are universal. They're globally applied.
Okay, so it's balanced. So what we see is not in real.
Correct.
Can we say that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you just made it clear.
I hope it's clear to everybody. There is no preferencing of TVET over higher education.
It's
treated
the same,
equally.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have come to the end of the show, Your Excellency, is there anything that you'd like to say to our viewers, Nepalese students, all Nepalese who are watching right now?
Sure. Listen, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your viewers, to students, prospective students. Just like to say a very warm welcome to all students who are considering applying to Australia. We look forward to providing Nepali students with a home away from home, with access to world-class education, the opportunity to earn internationally recognised qualifications, to be able to come back and contribute to Nepal's development with these great skills and networks and professional experience. To the parents of students, I would say we take the safety and well-being of all Nepali students and all international students very, very seriously. We work very hard to provide a safe and secure environment. So I would encourage parents to feel comforted that the Australian government takes its role as a custodian of Nepali students incredibly seriously. And to businesses, I would say, let's look for new opportunities to develop new relationships, whether that's in the education sector or in other sectors. The Nepali diaspora community is a critical bridge between our two countries. So I encourage the diaspora community as well to be closely involved in building new relationships between Australia and Nepal. But thank you.
So we also have to be aware of the right institutional agents.
Please choose your agents carefully. That's a very good message, and thank you for the reminder. It is so important to find reputable agents, people who are well established in the market and who you can be assured will look after the students' interests, not just now as they're applying, but once they get to Australia, we need to make sure that agents are continuing a pastoral care of the students that they've sent. And excellent counselling is necessary.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the wonderful conversation.
Lovely to see you again.
And wish you all the best for the coming 1 year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Info Plus, for genuine information.